All right. Welcome everyone to the November Lunch and Learn. Welcome again. There's two welcome slides because I really want to welcome you. Today we're gonna have this is Jay's schedule. We're gonna do a little welcome and housekeeping, and then Pat is going to speak, and then we just have we can just share the next two upcoming lunch and learns. We have those queued up to share what they will be for December and January. So we're actually not going to play this game because everybody seems to have already done it. Some at the last lunch and learn, and sometimes we'll do this thing in which we play a muting and unmuting game. But it looks like everyone has already figured out how to mute and unmute, so we won't play the mute and unmute, Simon says. We will be keeping an eye on the chat, so if you have any questions, you can put them there. You can also unmute yourself and ask questions throughout the presentation.
And thank you to Pat for including your contact information within the chat. So if anyone's looking for it, that's where it is.
And so this is just sort of our lunch and learns are a new thing that we're doing. We're trying to have an empowering collaborative opportunity for HMS families and caregivers to learn together from experts about issues that affect our students. Oh wait, and so that's my last slide for this one. We don't even need to see this one yet. All right, so I'm going to pass it over to Laura Boyd to introduce.
Sure. Well, we're very excited for our second lunch and learn. We're learning with all of them. And we want to offer a very warm welcome to Pat Bergmaier from 1847 Financial. He is a certified financial planner and a chartered special needs consultant, which I learned recently means that he truly understands the unique needs of families at HMS with financial planning. This is something that we heavily encourage at HMS. I think it is often misunderstood that financial planning means that there needs to be a certain amount of money to do financial planning, and that is incorrect. It is about thinking through each chapter of your child's life. It's about navigating government benefits, and it's about making sure that there are all the resources, that you're accessing all the resources that are available. And I see now that Tom Minger is on with us as well. Thank you for joining. I know that you are Pat's colleague, and they oversee the group of special needs financial planners specializing in special needs at 1847 Financial. So this is not going to be necessarily a deep dive. This is an enormous subject. Oh, and I'm glad Bob is joining us also. And this is an enormous subject. So this is going to be an overview. I am positive it will yield other subjects that we all say, wow, we need more information on that. And then that's a great opportunity for us to invite 1847 Financial back or other, and along with other financial planners that are well known to HMS to go into even further information. But I'm glad you're all here. It is being recorded for families who are not able to participate today. And we have had some, not financial planners in the past, but people speaking specifically about ABLE accounts or special needs trusts. And I believe Pat's going to be giving sort of a global overview of when you do what and how, and some of the main points to think through with this. So a warm welcome from HMS, Pat. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you. And again, thank you guys for taking the time during your lunch hour to listen to me talk for about 45 minutes here. But yeah, so as Laura mentioned, it's not going to be, can't make you all experts in special needs planning in the time we have. It's really to share with you, think of it as like a 30,000 foot overview on what this planning consists of, clear up some of the common confusing aspects of it that I've typically seen over the past 10 years. And I think really for all the speaking that I do and have done over the past 10 years is to hopefully motivate you to take an active role in this planning, to understand where the school districts and the government stops and where you really need to do things as parents for these individuals that depend on you, and really take the information that you're going to get today, once you have the mental capacity to digest it with everything going on, is hopefully make some actionable steps to say, I either need to do this, or I need to update what I've done, I need to fix what I've done, or I need to make progress in this planning, because you know, with if 2020 is any indication, I mean, stuff can happen at any point in time. And I've told people since March, I mean, this special needs planning situation isn't just going to disappear because a pandemic's going on. There's still going to be important milestones being hit, birthdays being attained that requires planning. And you need to do it because if you're on this call as a parent, that means that there's somebody that depends on you right now to some extent for their quality of life, and more than likely is going to be depending on you for the rest of his or her life. And this is why we do it. We get to be their voice, and we get to share with you information that hopefully you can use that's going to give them better opportunities, you know, and make life for them the way that you envision it. So what I wanted to do, and I'm not an artistic person, but I have a diagram that I've used in pretty much every initial meeting I have with clients to explain what goes into special needs planning. And look, there's no manual for this, right? There's no how-to, there's no cookie cutter approach. You can't, I mean, you can read some good books on special needs planning, but it's so individualized. You could have 10 kids, same diagnosis, same age, and what you as parents want for them, envision for them, and from a socioeconomic standpoint are able to do for them, it's different. So that's why this planning needs to be tailored. It needs to be, you know, it needs to be fluid and evolve as your situation evolves. But there's different players in this game, and there's different roles that each of them play. It's confusing as all hell out there. What do the attorneys do? What about benefits people? What about people like me that are financial planners? How do all of you guys do this, and where does one's planning stop where the other ones begin, and then how do we make sure everybody's on the same page and coordinated? So in my opinion, there's three main areas of a special needs plan and many subcategories below there, but if you keep it high level, and I think they're all equally important, it's just they're not, for whatever reason, given equal importance out in the special needs community. And what a lot of people will gravitate towards first is it's either the benefits or the work you do with an attorney. So I'm not an attorney. Tom's not an attorney. We can't give legal advice. We can't draft legal documents. So we can't do what the attorneys do. Conversely, they cannot do what we do. They can't give securities related advice, financial planning advice, insurance planning advice. So there should and has to be a close synergy between the legal and financial side of this planning, because what we do is so important for these individuals. But what the attorney does, and I don't want to dumb it down, because you really do need to work with a special needs estate planning attorney, somebody that does this type of law every single day of their practice. It's their passion, it's what they focus on. It's just not one of 10 things that they do, like family law, real estate, business. They can help you with a DUI, or if you get in trouble for something, and oh, by the way, maybe they can do your estate planning. You don't want that attorney. You want somebody that you go to their website and all you see is special needs, disability related stuff, elder law, Medicaid planning, whatever it might be. So what they will do for you, say you have two parents, you both will get a will. A will is a simple way of saying who gets what, when do they receive it, how do they receive it, and who raises my minor children. Who raises my minor children is probably the most important decision we can make as parents for any of our kids, special needs or not. So your will, one of the most important legal documents you can create. Your medical and financial power of attorney is also extremely important. You may not know, if you have a 401k or a 403b, and you're a client of mine, I can't tell your spouse or partner or anybody else what's going on with that plan, or take distribution instructions, investment advice from or guidance from anybody else, unless you have a financial power of attorney that is signed and within a couple of years on file with us. So your financial institutions need these things. Medical practitioners need somebody that they can legally speak to release your medical information, take medical direction from if you're incapacitated. So that's why those documents are extremely important as well. But probably the most important document that is required for anybody that has a child with a disability is a special needs trust. And I know, you know, with a lot of the families within HMS, you might have funded special needs trusts, other types of special needs trusts. So when I say special needs trust, that's confusing because there's two main types and they work differently, and the government's involved differently with each of them. But the type you proactively create as part of your estate planning as a parent is called a third-party special needs trust or a supplemental needs trust. And what that trust document does is, the main purpose of that is to protect government benefit eligibility, to say we can leave millions of dollars to this third-party special needs trust, and as long as it's drafted correctly, not a penny of the dollars that are owned by that trust eventually are countable against government benefits. So that's the way that if we want to leave money behind to our loved ones that have a disability, it's the only way to do it without messing up all of the benefits that you probably worked hard to obtain. So the difference between this third-party trust, though, and what is also common, like I mentioned, a first-party or self-settled special needs trust, typically funded medical malpractice, personal injuries, that sort of thing, is the third-party special needs trust that would be created and funded by anybody besides the disabled individual. When that individual later dies, it goes back to whoever you want it to go to. It can come back to you. It could go back to the siblings, nieces and nephew, a charity, whatever it might be. There is no government involvement at the back end. There's also not as much oversight or restriction while your loved one's alive, because you're not technically spending the government's money. It's money that was set aside in this trust for the benefit of this individual. The government's not getting any of it on the back end, so the restrictions are very limited on third-party funded special needs trusts and what you can use. So that type of trust, the proactive trust, very different than that other trust, the first-party trust, because a first-party trust, the ones funded by settlements, required Medicaid reimbursement upon the death of the beneficiary from any kind of Medicaid benefits paid out since birth. So if you have one of those, guess which money we spend first? We spend the first-party money. It is a little trickier to spend it because you are technically spending the government's money. However, you have a good partnership and you work closely with your trustee, we can come up with some pretty creative ways that we can use that money to maximize the quality of life for your loved one. So that's all I'll say on the first party trust, because that's unique to your situation if you do have one. So I'll spend from here on out, if I say special needs trust, it's the third party special needs trust funded by anybody besides the disabled individual. So, all right, it's there to protect government benefits, but that's great. But we all know government benefits do not really maximize quality of life, right? It's basic necessities, a floor for these, especially adults with disabilities. But funded adequately, the special needs trust is there to enrich quality and maximize quality of life. It's there to provide additional care that may or may not be provided by Medicare or Medicaid. It's there to provide for ongoing day-to-day or week-to-week management of the life of this individual with special needs. I mean, I have clients that have kids in their 30s and 40s living independently in apartments that they're there 2 to 3 times a week. So who replaces you as mom and dad to check in on your child 2 to 3 times a week? It's not the government. It's not your supports coordinator. So do we find agencies that can do this and privately pay for to be there if you're not physically able to, or when you're no longer here? They're living in a group home. Who's there on a weekly or a couple time a month basis to go to that group home, make sure it's a clean environment, things are getting done for the individual, and figuring out what do they need? It's a lot when you think of how encompassing special needs planning is. I mean, we've spent a lot of time focusing on the individual that has the disability, but what about everybody else? Parents, your quality of life is more important than theirs. And I don't say that in it to take away from what we're doing for your child, but when we engage clients and we choose to bring them on and they partner with us to manage their financial planning, their investments, the promise we make to them, our priority at all times is them, mom and dad, or the parents. And the reason for that is just like when you get on a plane and they're like, parents, you need to put your oxygen masks on first before you put your kids' oxygen masks on, is if your financial situation is secure, if your quality of life is maintained while you're alive, and you live till age 120, which would be perfect, then a lot of the things I talk about you don't need to worry about. But if you can make sure that your comfort level is there, your future medical needs are taken care of, you're not worrying about spending money, you can retire as close to when you want to as possible, not run out of money in retirement, that's going to trickle down and make sure that your loved one's going to be taken care of as long as you're alive. So close second to goal number 1 is goal number 2, which is we need to take care of your child that may not be able to take care of themselves financially for the rest of their life. How do we make sure that we turn this trust document, which is what you create with the attorney, it's just paperwork, it's just a stack of documents written very well, mind you, but it's not an asset. It's not tangible. You can't exchange a special needs trust document that you have with an attorney for a TV or a trip or entertainment or something fun that is going to enrich quality of life. So if you stop with the attorney and you create the trust, but do nothing else, all that's going to do is be a very fancy, expensive stack of paperwork that's going to sit on a shelf, and it's never going to do what you want it to do, which is provide quality of life, because there's not going to be enough money in it. So the estate planning, we need the framework for these documents. The benefits, we need to not only get, but maximize benefits there. So we know there's a floor of what we can get through the government, through SSI, eventually Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, waivers, Section 8 vouchers, food stamps, whatever it might be. All of these benefits that are out there, we want to be able to get them, but we want to make sure that that's not all that's there for our loved one. We need to say, we have a funding strategy for this trust. We know that we are able to retire. We're able to spend our money and not worry about spending our money. Live our lives, live a long life, not run out of money, yet still make sure that if we died yesterday, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, there is enough money that will go into this special needs trust to provide the quality of life that we envision. And it will go there in the most tax efficient way as we possibly can create it. So Uncle Sam's not coming in on the back end and taking an unnecessary amount of what we worked hard to accumulate for our family. And by the way, if we have more than one heir, we're trying to do this as equitably as we possibly can. And I've learned equal doesn't mean fair, fair doesn't mean equal, but if you have more than one child, and especially if you have grandchildren, you're probably going to want to do something for everybody. And it's hard. I mean, that's why, look, this isn't something God forbid you try to do this on your own as a self-manager of your portfolio, and you do your own taxes and you go to LegalZoom to do your legal work. That's a disaster waiting to happen. You need to surround yourself by the right team. You need people that do this all the time. The attorneys that can draft the right legal framework, that can educate you properly on, is power of attorney best for you? Is the guardianship proceeding best for you at 18? To navigate the funding of the trust in partnership with your financial planners. So, what we do on a daily basis, it's everything on the financial side. It's all of the things that regular financial planning entails: planning for college and debt management and cash flow and insurance planning, life insurance, disability, long-term care, investment management, retirement planning, the tax planning that's in incidents of financial planning. That's what we do. It's just our expertise is doing it for families that are planning 2 generations of income, mom and dad, and the disabled adult child for the rest of his or her life. And it does change things. When you're planning a retirement for just say 2 spouses and they don't need to leave anything behind, well, heck, their retirement plan can be much more lucrative because we don't need to protect things when they pass away. We could say, all right, well, look, let my last check bounce. My kids don't need the money if I die. I just want to maximize me. I want to maximize our ability to travel and do the things we want to do in retirement. So if there's nothing left, it's not the end of the world. Well, you can't think that way when you have a child with special needs. And our job is to not let you think that way, because, hey, we're here for them, saying you need to do these things for them to give them all the opportunities that you want for them, and not put that physical or financial burden on anybody else. And, one of the questions we ask in every initial meeting, and we always preface it with, it's probably the hardest question we're going to ask you, but if something happened to you yesterday, what does today look like for your child? And then there's usually like this sunken feeling that you see, and it's like a blank stare, and tears are often followed by that. But that's why we want to get that answer. We want to have that answer to say, oh, well, look, I'm not going to, number one, but if I went to bed last night and didn't wake up today, I know there's legal plans that are going to be there. I know who's going to oversee the money. I know where my child's going to live for the foreseeable future, and if it's in this house or with somebody else. I have an idea of what I want for them in the future. And I also have an idea of what I definitely don't want for them in the future. And I've communicated this to the people that are going to be involved in their lives. And, we have these investments and these insurance policies that will fund the special needs trust. We have other assets that we've planned with our tax advisors and our financial planners and our attorneys. We know which accounts to not leave to the special needs trust because of the embedded tax inefficiencies. So we're going to leave them to the other kids. The trust is going to be funded adequately with the life insurance or the Roth IRAs or taxable investments. And then you can go on living. and navigate crazy years like 2020 and worry about yourself and all the good things in life, and let somebody else worry about making sure your investments are positioned in a way that are going to be proper, and that they're educating you on the tax planning that needs to be there to minimize, your future tax exposure and your kids. And that gives you one less thing to worry about. And that's what we hope to accomplish, is financially take one less of those stressors in life off your shoulders, to know that you've got this plan in place and that you're updating it regularly. And, to give you the peace of mind that, yeah, you can pay for your other kids' college and your child with special needs is still going to be okay. Or, yeah, you can go on this vacation, you two together, that you've always wanted to do, and spend $15,000, $25,000 on it. And your trust is still going to be funded. I bring these up because these are real conversations. It's like, we worry about spending money on ourselves in retirement because that's less money for the kids. Well, if we can stricken that thought out of your life for the rest of your life, you don't want that stress. You don't want to worry about spending your money in retirement. You deserve it. You sacrificed enough to get there. So it's just, how do you do both? And look, some of these things cost money. Yes, some of these things involve investing money. And so I learned early on 10 years ago when I shifted my practice into this, disabilities don't discriminate. You could have many zeros off of your net worth. You could have a few zeros off of your net worth, but it doesn't change the fact that there's some little guy or little girl out there that needs to be taken care of and planned for. So
I think that's one of the questions that came through.
Oh, there are some.
Yeah, there's a question that came through that I think is a really good segue into what you're saying, Pat, which is, Christina asked, we have a special needs trust that gets funded through life insurance money when we die. We aren't funding it now. Is this something you see people doing? And Christina, yes.
Awesome
and
question.
The key is having a strategy. And I'll let Pat continue with that. The idea of, it's not, a lot of people think you need to fund this all of a sudden immediately, and they put a lot of stress on themselves. It's not. It's more important to have a strategy. And so I'll let Pat explain that from there.
Yeah, and that's a good question, because it's a stumbling block that's very common. It's, all right, I've created this trust, and now I'm trying to figure out, if I died yesterday, what does my child need for the rest of his or her life? And I don't have it sitting in a bank account somewhere on top of what I'm going to do with all used for my other financial goals. So, all the parents on this call, if your son or daughter needed for something, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume you're going to pay for it, right? And if you think your son or daughter is going to be relying on you in retirement and you're still here, who's going to pay for the things in retirement that your son or daughter needs for quality of life? You are, right? So as long as one of the parents are alive, you're going to do everything that third-party special needs trust has the capability of doing. So you're the living, breathing special needs trust. You're just called mom or dad. So the funding from your assets really doesn't need to occur until the second one of you passes away, because that's when we need the trustee financially to fill your shoes and then continue to pay for things for your son or daughter to give them the same lifestyle that you had. So no, you don't need to be funding your special needs trust right now. You don't need to think about, oh, I got to put $50 or $100 away into the trust or into an Able account or anywhere for him or her, because look, every dollar you put away for your own retirement can be used for him or her when you're in retirement. So, you do though need to understand, look, if it's life insurance, so not all life insurances are created equal. Yeah, they can work in certain circumstances. Having done this for 10 years and hundreds of times and understanding what life insurances work better for special needs, that's what you want to be educated on and say, do I have the right plan? Certain plans work very, very well in the short term, like term insurance, but they aren't very good in the long term. And what are some of the better options out there that can both create a funding strategy for the trust, but also not inhibit our ability to maximize your retirement income? We want something that can do both. Increase your ability to get more income in retirement and also have a back-end funding strategy for the trust, if it makes sense for your situation. So very, very good question. And I've seen people, freeze in their planning because it's so overwhelming how much they think their child's going to need. And they're trying to figure out how they save for everything else and pay off debt and have any idea of any semblance of the retirement they want and create that bucket of money on top of things. So when you have special needs trust, the question I always get asked is, which attorney is it? I mean, in the Philadelphia area, for one, there's not many attorneys that are experts in special needs planning. So, you know, I prided myself early on as I wanted to surround myself by those that were experts in areas that we weren't. So if you do need somebody to talk to, be it an attorney or a benefits advisor, I mean, benefits alone, probably the most frustrating aspect of special needs planning, trying to navigate those. So if you want somebody to utilize, if it's a benefits advisor, if you've been denied and you need an attorney to help you with an appeal, those resources are out there. And you know, if we don't know the answer, typically we know somebody that does, and we can connect you to that. So I know I think ABLE account was something that we wanted to talk about, and ABLE accounts and again, it's just like everything: life insurance, an IRA, a 401k, a stock, a mutual fund, a bond. They're all tools. And if you use the wrong tool to try to get a job done, it's either not going to get the job done or get it done very inefficiently. So an ABLE account is one of the tools that we have at our disposal when it comes to special needs planning. So what I don't think an ABLE account is this magical cure for special needs. You know, it isn't a new way and the only way to save for your child that has a disability. Special needs trusts have been around since the early 90s to set aside funds for your child. But going back to what I said with when do you need to fund the special needs trust? Well, you don't need anything from mom and dad's pocket to go into the special needs trust until mom and dad are no longer here. Because as long as the money's in your name, mom and dad, you can use it however you want. You can use it for yourself, for your other kids, for your child with special needs. You have no investment restrictions. You can invest that in individual equities, in exchange traded funds, in real estate. There is a lot more flexibility keeping money in your own name. The ABLE account, once you fund it, number one, it's very, very restrictive on what you can use it for. And as an investment guy, it's also very restrictive on what you can invest in. It's only a handful of mutual funds that you can pick from. And in Pennsylvania, for example, Pennsylvania is pretty unique, where our state allows you to deduct for state income taxes, the 3.07% dollars you contribute to an ABLE account. So the way I've positioned it to clients, it's, look, you're spending money already. That's considered a disability related expense, which is what ABLE accounts are allowed to be used for. So you're already spending this money. And in my mind, I don't think it's worth doing it unless it's over $5,000-6,000 a year you're spending. But let's say you're spending 10 grand a year on therapies that aren't covered by Medicaid that you're privately paying for, medications, special dietary things, rent. Well, let's just use this ABLE account as like a pass-through, like a health savings account or a flex spending account if you guys have them, but for your disability expenses. So we put the 10 grand we're going to spend into the ABLE account first. It saves us $300 for the state of Pennsylvania. And then we take that money right back out and it's reimbursing us for these disability related expenses. We're not using it as a long-term investment vehicle. We're using it as a short-term pass-through to get the tax advantages that our state allows. It doesn't make sense to be investing in an ABLE account for long-term future expenses of your child, because like I said, if you're a parent, keep the money in your own name. And if you wanted to fund something for them in the future, invest in a brokerage account and buy much better investment options than the ABLE account's going to make available to you. There's really no need to fund that ABLE account, in my opinion, unless you need to for benefit eligibility and you're in like a pinch and you need to get money out of your kid's name. They receive an inheritance less than $15,000. Yes, maybe an ABLE account can be a viable alternative in a self-settled special needs trust, but it is not something that you have to be doing. It's not something that needs to be part of your planning. It needs to, just like everything else you do, be part of a strategic plan, looking at the macro view of everything else that you're doing. So that's how I would recommend it. Don't just go to the website to open one because somebody told you these are great. It's like, no, what are they? If they're great, what are you comparing it to? Just like if something's bad, well, what are we comparing it to? Why is it bad? So an ABLE account is really good compared to leaving $10,000 in your child's name and they lose Medicaid and SSI, right? But it's not really good that if you could take $10,000 and put it into a brokerage account with no restrictions on how you can use it, compared to putting $10,000 in an ABLE account as an investment. Now you've got restrictions and limitations. So that's my 2 cents on it. It's not a bad thing. It's just, I think it's been oversold that it's this fix for everything special needs and everyone should have one, where it's not. It's got to be part of something you do ancillary to all of this stuff on this page, the proper planning, this third-party special needs trust, that sort of thing. So one of the other things that I commonly hear with those that have had a settlement payout into a trust, I think most common one is, I'm frustrated over the trustee, they never let me spend any of the money. Two, I can never get a hold of them even if I want to spend any money. And I don't even know what's going on. So those are all things that can be fixed. I mean, your trustee is somebody that, understanding that trust document and how it's worded, you do have the ability of changing a trustee from somebody that might be in Texas or Washington that was assigned by the courts when the settlement was done to somebody that is more local, somebody that you have more access to, and you definitely want transparency of fees. So the investment management of that trust should be based on, well, number one, what do you need on a year-by-year basis for your child? If you do demonstrate a need and there are allowable distributions from the special needs trust, there shouldn't be any fight or argument that the trustee is giving you on a distribution that is otherwise allowable. Yes, they're getting paid on the money that's in there, sometimes pretty handsomely. And there has been court cases that have been decided in recent history about trustees, really not performing the fiduciary role that they're supposed to, and not doing anything wrong from a management of the investments, but just not spending any of the money, and they're just collecting fee after fee after fee. So understand that you have options. A good attorney will be able to dissect that trust document, and there are local trust, special needs trust departments in the area that you could talk to if you feel there's a better fit for you. But either way, the money should be invested. If your child's a teenager, invested based on they're a teenager, some of this money may not be used for years down the road. So let's invest it appropriately. Let's invest it. We don't need to be super conservative with these investments. We can be in the stock market because that's where we would want this money to grow. But the thing is, you really do want to have a good partnership with the trustee to say, how do we, under the letter of the law, can we use this money as effectively as possible for the beneficiary of the trust to maximize their quality of life? So there are resources to help you navigate that. And, don't feel alone if you don't hear from them more than once or twice a year, and they're hard to get a hold of and even harder to get money from. So,
Hey, Pat, on the topic of ABLE accounts, we got a question that one of the things we see is how do you spend the money and what can it be used for? In this case, can we use the money from an ABLE account to pay for a wheelchair vehicle conversion, such as a wheelchair van?
Absolutely. Yeah, that is like right in the definition of disability related expense. And I've had a conversation last year with a client that's going to have to buy one for their son that uses a wheelchair. And I said, look, let's do this. I think it was going to be like $40,000 or something like that. Let's put 15 grand into the ABLE account this year. Let's put 15 grand into the ABLE account after January 1st. So that 15 grand, remember, they're getting the tax deduction on that. The state of Pennsylvania, they live in Pennsylvania, so helpful. They're going to be spending this money anyway, they know, on a disability related expense. So yeah, anything that's adaptive vehicles, adaptive technology, rents allowable, therapies, anything like that. And look, so ABLE accounts, you have to use them for disability related expenses to get the positive tax benefits on growth, which are tax-free distributions on earnings for qualified disability expenses. But if you put 10 grand in today and there's nominal earnings in it and you need it next week for something for yourself, it's not a disability related expense, that $10,000 is going to come back to you anyway. There's no penalties on what you put into it. You might have to owe the state of Pennsylvania back if you're a PA resident on the income tax deduction, but you're not going to get hit with a 10% early withdrawal penalty or anything else on a contribution that you didn't get any positive tax benefits from.
So when we have another question on the ABLE account, and this is more of a tactic. Is an ABLE account beneficial to deposit the excess money from SSI to keep under that threshold of $2,000? She was speaking to a rep payee from a rep payee standpoint.
So the quick answer is, yeah, that's the easiest fix for an ABLE account if you're getting in jeopardy of having too much money in your child's name. However, I wouldn't rush to do it. So first of all, the question is, how did you ever get too much money into their name if it's off of SSI, if you're not charging room and board at an adequate level of usually I see $550 a month of room and board. So you're charging them room and board, and then you just need to be more on top of it to come up with creative ways to spend the rest of the money that they have in their rep payee account. And look, if they don't have other expenses, I can understand it's maybe hard to do that. But look, if they have a cell phone, or if you're driving them places, these are all expenses that you should be using that money for. And with the SSI coming in, you want to maximize it at the $783 a month. So the room and board is a requirement. But if they go out to eat, yeah, you're spending their money. They go somewhere on in travel, use their money. I mean, the SSI should be something that you're using on a regular basis, and it's never accumulating more than like $200 a month. And then I'm sure you can come up with one or two things you've spent on your child over the past 12 months where you can reimburse yourself for. And that might give you like an icky feeling. Well, I don't want to use their money to pay for something I would have paid for as a parent. My air quotes I use too often. You're paying for it. Really, you're just picking up money from the rep payee account, which is a bad account to have money in because it's countable. Paying yourself back for something and putting it back down into a great account that's in your names, and you can earmark that money still for your son or daughter, but the government now doesn't count it against them anymore for benefit eligibility. So the ABLE account would give you a really simple, quick fix for that. But I think there's better options. And we see it more often when somebody's getting Social Security off of a parent. They're getting like $1,200 to $1,500 a month of Social Security. Well, that's a harder dollar amount to spend on a monthly basis if you don't have major expenses. But the first thing you do is, if they're living at home, you bump up room and board, $700-800 a month, and then you just come up with creative ways to spend it on things for them. You honestly, anything you would otherwise pay for them, you're using their money to pay for it, and then you're not getting into that same situation. So, but yeah, it can be used for SSI. If you have back payments from SSI, that doesn't matter. I think you're given either 6 or 12 months to spend that, so you have more time to spend it. If some parent or relative or somebody like that dies and accidentally leaves them an inheritance, yes, that is where an ABLE account is a very, very viable strategy, as long as it's lower than $15,000 that they receive from the inheritance. So, but I would, again, just like everything else, kind of look at all your options on the table before you make a decision on what you do. These are all good questions. Anybody else have any questions or need any clarity on what I talked about there?
The chat right now is empty, but if you have a question and you can click off mute, you're welcome to ask it as well if you would like. Hey, Pat, maybe one of the things we could talk about is the memorandum of intent. We've talked a lot about the financial side of things, but there's that kind of in-between space between legal, financial, and then really talking to the heart of which we deal with every day, which is more the emotional.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. So if you haven't kind of put pen to paper or typed it up, like what you envision for your child for the rest of his or her life, it is very involved emotionally to put it together, but it is an emotional lift once you have it done, because look, yes, there's the money, yes, there's the legal planning, but at the end of the day, there's a person that's involved with this. And you guys as parents know what you want for them better than anybody else ever will. And unless you're giving them details to that in a way that says, trustee, this is what we want for our son or daughter. This is what we want money to be spent on. This is what we envision as quality of life. This is what we want around the holidays. This is what we want religion wise. This is like anything and everything about your son or daughter. There's a document you could put together called a memorandum of intent. It's also known as a letter of intent, but it puts all this stuff down. It's not a legal document, so it doesn't stand up in court, but it's there more as a guide for your family members, trustees, that sort of thing. I've seen some very thick. I've seen some like digital format, but it is something big, because other than that, the trustee is going to have this big pot of money and not really know what did you want for them. What kind of housing situation were you okay with? Maybe, if you said we want to buy a house, and if it's with 2 or 3 other families and our kids all live there in the future together, we would want that as part of our son or daughter's plan. You know, we want them to live here in this area where it's close by to family and the neighborhood they grew up in and whatever it might be, rather than leave people trying to figure that out on their own. So if you want a template for that, please shoot me an email and we can send you over a template. And that's something you add to take stuff off on maybe even a yearly basis. So on the ABLE accounts, no, they can be set up after the fact if there's money that needs to be moved. It's just if you're in PA, you go to paable.gov and it's a Vanguard site. You set it up and transfer money. The funding of the trust, we have a calculator that we use in terms of, all right, look, if you died yesterday, or if it's 25 years from now or 50 years from now, here's how much you need to go into the special needs trust based on what you've put down on the expenses that you think your child's going to incur. You know, without that, we're shooting in the dark. Without having an idea of this is what it's going to cost every month if I died yesterday, it's very difficult to figure out if you'll ever have enough money to fund the trust, let alone have enough money to retire off of and fund the trust. So that's a huge step in the special needs plan that's commonly overlooked because it's a hard number to come up with.
Hey, Lori, the question about the memorandum of intent, it's a basic template. It'll give you some loose instruction, but it's really intensely personal. So you know which doctors you would take your child to, and you know which doctors you would never even allow a stranger to go to. So
Yeah.
it's loose in that sense, but it will give you enough of a guideline to start from, and you'll kind of feel the flow from there.
Yeah, I didn't remember if you had given that to us before, Pat. I'm sure you gave it to me 10 times already, and I've stalled for 10 years, right? So, sorry, but
Well,
frankly, with COVID, you never know, things could go quick, so you got to have that done.
Yeah, amen to that for sure. But yeah, we can send you the updated one, Lori, just so you have it. So anything else that's frustrating people in this planning, or it's confusing, anything else that keeps you up at night that you have questions on or need clarity on? No such thing as a bad question in this type of forum.
Did we address the timing of setting up an ABLE account? Does it have to be done before an inheritance is received?
Yep.
I think you may have mentioned, but
Yeah, it can be opened at any time after the fact to deal with it. I guess another thing too is I think I touched on it very briefly, but special needs planning being multi-generational. Like, yes, we're focusing on the individual with a disability. We don't want to forget about his or her siblings and the effect that lack of planning will put on them, the burden, I hate saying burden, but the responsibility that some siblings are given without any kind of like input in, did I want this? Did I know the ramifications of taking this on? So it's not just the individual with a disability's quality of life, it's you as parents, it's the siblings. So it touches everybody. And I think the neurotypical siblings sometimes are the ones usually like, not forgotten about, but we don't understand the impact that some of these decisions place on them. And when I have a parent that comes to me and says, well, they're going to live with me as long as we're alive, and if we die, they're going to live with their brother or sister. And I'm like, okay, that's a lot. Have you talked to the brother or sister about that and gone through the ramifications of that now in the future when they're married, when they have kids and they have jobs and commitments and coaching ball games and all that kind of stuff? Do they know what it's going to take that on? And I think there needs to be a more robust plan than they're going to live with their brother or sister. I mean, you need to understand that there's options out there, and I've seen it happen. I had a client that their daughter, through a lot of fight from mom, just qualified for consolidated waiver in Pennsylvania, and they bought her a house, and she's going to be moving in there by herself with full-time live-in support because she's got some behavioral issues where she can't live with really any roommates. But the plan 7-8 years ago when we first started working with mom and dad was, well, her brother's going to take care of her. She's going to live with her brother, who was, I think, just graduating college at that point in time. Well, over the years, and he eventually became a client once he started working and had money that was putting money away. He just got married, and those conversations have changed dramatically. Mom and dad have kind of seen the light of, this isn't best for him and his new wife. This actually isn't even best for our daughter to be in that situation. And for us, and talking as the mom and dad, we want we want to focus on ourselves too. And I think it's best for everybody involved that we find her a house, we buy that house, we pay the mortgage on it. She lives there with her support. So we're here to test the waters and see what's it like when she's not living with us, and give her the confidence that she can do it. Give ourselves the peace of mind that she can do it, and we know what, common errors are there, so we can fix them while we're still alive, so that when we're gone, she's already transitioned into a place that she's comfortable with. There is a routine, there is a system of supports there, and then that's going to be huge for them once they make the jump and formally cut the cord and she moves out. That's going to be the hardest day, but as they get used to it, I think they're going to love the fact that they did it now rather than didn't, and something major happened and they died or had to go to a nursing home, and now it's like, where does she go, who does she live with? That was not the situation that we wanted to have happen, and I've seen that happen way too often, and that's what you want to try to avoid. So
Hey, Pat, we got a couple more questions coming in. I know we're creeping up on that 1 o'clock. I think one of the things to just consider from our perspective is we recognize we are in a group setting, and we want to be sensitive to that. So if you have questions, really the next step, if you want to bounce ideas off, if you just have something you'd like to talk about more privately, our first conversation is always complimentary. But the questions that we're starting to see are kind of going down that path. So I'll open it up to Pat to answer. The first one is there's a lot of talk these days of having a supported decision-making in place for our loved ones. How do you integrate that philosophy into the planning that's being discussed?
I was going to answer the easier one.
Question.
I was going to answer the easier one first about guardianship at 18 or 21, then tackle the more in-depth one. So guardianship's at 18. You make a decision, either do you pursue guardianship or does your son or daughter have capacity to sign a power of attorney? So 18 is the big age for that. 21 is your transition age, typically. So on the supported decision-making, when it comes to making this decision at 18 of guardian, do I pursue guardianship? Essentially, we are huge advocates for guardianship only if it's absolutely necessary. It is not your first thing that you go to. It is really if there is no capacity there, if your child's in danger of being taken advantage of, or they just aren't able to, in the attorney's eye, have the capacity to sign a power of attorney, is guardianship at a last resort. But the supported decision making, I mean, you still need a medical power of attorney that's involved there, and I would recommend that over guardianship as long as capacity is there. So it is huge, the advocating for these individuals that are able to be as independently functioning as possible. That's what we're trying to focus on in this. But you can say supported decision making all you want, but if they're incapacitated and they go to a doctor and you don't have a medical power of attorney in place, then no doctor is going to talk to you if you're not the parent and it's not life sustaining measures. So we talk about that. That's usually more on the legal side of things. How are you going to structure things from future decision making on their behalf? But we have the conversation simply to prep clients with, hey, you're going to have to talk about this with the attorney anyway. But very good question on the guardianship. It just don't go to an attorney you come to them with a child with special needs that's now 18 and they just say, oh, well, you need guardianship. No, you want, well, why? Substantiate that. Why do they need guardianship versus an alternative like power of attorney? Unfortunately, there are attorneys out there still that get paid a few $1,000s for guardianship, a few $100s for power of attorney, and they push people to guardianship. So we're 10 minutes to 1. I could keep talking for hours on this topic and things that we do with clients, but again, some of the more personalized things I think are better left to a one-on-one conversation. I will tell you that with the investment philosophy, managing 2 lifetimes of income, you need to tweak things. Fixed income, specifically in a multi-generational retirement income portfolio, makes very little logical sense over the long run. Right now, in the next 4 to 6 months, fixed income as a temporary place may not be a bad idea, but having it as part of a investment plan that's for your future retirement income and what will be left to your kids really doesn't make sense. So you need to look at some alternatives to that. Make sure that, when you're given investment advice or given an insurance planning device to buy this policy or do something like that, you got to ask yourself, was my child's situation even taken into consideration when this advice was given to me? Or was I given the typical advice that everybody my age I feel like they're getting. Well, you're different than everybody else your age because you have your son or daughter situation. If you have legal work done, when's the last time you talked to your attorney? If you have not talked to them this year after the Secure Act implementation, January 1st, then you better, get on the phone, reach out to them and say, hey, do I need to change anything with any trust provisions based on the Secure Act's changes? If it's going on 3 to 5 years where you haven't talked to your attorney, then you should reach out to them, or maybe a fresh set of eyes from a legal standpoint to look at documents that you have in place. Seen a lot of bad legal documents over the years from from clients that don't know. I mean, you don't know any better. You trust the people you go to for advice, and sometimes you never know until it's too late. In investment wise, we tell people, and I think Laura mentioned it earlier, for whatever reason, if it's not us, I hope it's somebody like us, somebody that is an expert in the financial side of special needs planning, that understands wealth management and how it's different for what you're trying to accomplish, that is, versed in insurance planning, focused on special needs situations. Your insurance agent that may just sell insurance and have been doing it for a long time, they're going to miss things. Your average investment advisor, I don't care if it's Edward Jones, Raymond James, or LPL, if they're not doing it all the time with special needs, there's mistakes that are too often made. But I think the most common area of mistakes are those that do it themselves. Vanguard is not in a position to help you with this. The newly graduated college kid that answers the phone when you call them does not know anything about special needs planning and can't give you advice. And if you're trying to navigate 50, 60 years of income and volatile markets and tax changes on your own, I mean, that's unfortunately probably going to lead to more mistakes than you want. So please work with somebody. And if it's not us, I'd be happy to give you another couple of names of financial advisors who I trust in this area that are experts in special needs planning. There's not a lot of us, unfortunately. But I'd rather see somebody do this with somebody that's on my list of trusted advisors than somebody that isn't and is approaching you just like they do every one of their clients. You're an age, you're in a model, and nothing is tailored to you because of your kid's situation. So I'll stop talking. If anybody else has any questions for the chat, or if you want to jump on and ask something. And as Tom said, our initial meetings are complimentary. If you want to continue this one-on-one, see in more detail what it is we do and how we do it, and most importantly, how we get compensated to do these things, and see if there's anything that we could do to help, we are always here as a resource. And one last thing. Any other families, let them know these resources are out there. We're doing we're calling a special needs at noon every Wednesday from 12 to 1, similar to this. People just jump on and we might go through something more formal or answer people's questions and topics, whatever it might be. So thank you guys. I really appreciate you spending your lunch with us. Stay well. Take advantage of the market. If it does drop another 20, 30% like it did in March, don't be afraid of that. That's going to be an amazing buying opportunity for you. And make sure you're surrounding yourselves by the right advisors.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And I'm just going to share what our next 2 lunch and learns are for families. We will be having in December and that doesn't look as beautiful as I wanted to. There we go. In December and January, we will be doing medical transition. In December, we will be talking with Lauren Gillespie from DuPont, and in January, we'll be talking to Mary Stevens from Jefferson. They have talked to one another and sort of set it up to be a part 1 and part 2 for a medical transition. So that's what we have to look forward to for the next 2 months coming forward. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future lunch and learns, please let us know. I will be sending out a survey about this lunch and learn to get feedback. And it has been recorded, so you can tell all the other parents to watch it, or you can go back and watch it whenever you'd like. I'm stopping the recording.
All right, thank you.